The cold wind swept through the barren landscape, carrying with it a sense of isolation as the farm's vast fields stretched endlessly beneath a gray sky. But in the shadows of the tree, something darker was unfolding. The mare stood motionless, her body taut with fear. Her foal, barely old enough to walk, huddled against her side, trembling. The farmer had tied them there, abandoned them, leaving them exposed to the wolves. It was an act of cruelty, but also one of desperation. He had done it with a chilling certainty, knowing full well what the outcome would likely be. But what happened next wasn't anything the farmer could have anticipated. The cold-hearted man, having left the creatures to their fate, went about his business, indifferent to the impending danger. His mind, already burdened with thoughts of profit and survival, had no place for the helpless animals. The wolves, drawn by the scent of weakness, circled closer, their howls piercing the silence of the night. The mare, trembling with fear but resolute, pawed at the ground, trying to stay calm for her foal, whose small body shook in fear. Yet, despite everything, something in the air seemed different. The wolves, those predatory hunters, did not close in immediately. Something unseen, something unexpected, was about to unfold. What happened next would defy logic and leave everyone, including the farmer, staring in disbelief. What do you think could save them? Would the wolves claim their prey, or was there something larger at play here, something beyond understanding? The night stretched on, deep and endless, as the wolves circled with increasing hunger. The howling grew louder, echoing across the empty fields, and the moonlight bathed the scene in an eerie glow. The mare stood still, her eyes darting nervously between the distant sounds of the pack and her foal, who was nestled as close to her as possible. The little creature's legs shook, barely able to stand as it clung to its mother. But the mare was strong, she would not give up. She nudged her foal gently, urging it to stay quiet, to stay still. The ropes binding them to the tree bit into their skin, but there was no escaping. They were trapped. The wolves grew bolder. One of them, the leader, slunk closer, eyes glinting in the dim light, drawn by the scent of vulnerability. His steps were slow, deliberate, as if savoring the moment before the inevitable attack. The mare's heart pounded in her chest, each beat loud and fast in her ears. She tried to take a step forward, but the ropes held her back, leaving her helpless. She could hear the wolves now, their growls low and threatening. There was no way out. They were close enough now to strike. The foal whinnied softly, a sound of pure fear. It was a sound that pierced the stillness of the night, breaking the calm and sending a chill down the mare's spine. She had never wanted to see her baby so afraid. But then something shifted. A rustling in the nearby bushes. A slight sound, almost imperceptible over the howling winds and the growls of the wolves. The mare's ears flicked toward the sound, her gaze sharpening. The wolves paused. The lead wolf turned its head in the direction of the rustling. It was as though something, or someone, had interrupted the tension. For a fleeting moment, the mare thought she imagined it. But no. There was something out there. In the distance, the silhouette of a figure appeared, an unexpected presence. The wolves, distracted for a moment, hesitated. The figure was human, but it wasn't the farmer. It was a man from the nearby farm, someone who had heard the distant cries of the mare and foal from the other side of the fields. He had seen the farmer's indifference earlier and could no longer stand by. He knew he had to act, even if it meant facing the wolves himself. The man's heart pounded in his chest as he moved quietly but steadily toward the trees where the mare and foal were tied. He had no idea what he was walking into, but something told him it wasn't too late. He couldn't let the animals face this nightmare alone. His hand gripped a heavy stick, more a tool of defense than offense, but it was all he had. As he approached, the wolves watched him carefully, their eyes narrowing with suspicion. He took a deep breath, his eyes locked on the mare. There was a bond between them, something deeper than just a rescuer and the rescued. The mare's eyes met his, a silent plea in her gaze. The man didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, slowly at first, then faster as he realized the wolves were reluctant to get any closer. They were unsure. Was it the man's presence that startled them? Or was there something else in the air, a strange force that stopped them in their tracks? But the danger was far from over. The wolves were still close, and their hunger was not easily deterred. The man knew he had little time to act. His pulse quickened as he reached for the rope binding the mare, knowing every second mattered. The wolves were shifting, moving in toward the prey. And yet, something strange was happening. The mare, as weak as she was, seemed to grow more confident. Her ears pricked up. She stamped her hooves on the ground, creating a sound that was almost defiant. The foal, too, stood taller, trembling but no longer cowering. What was happening? Was it the presence of the man? Or was something else at play here? The wolves hesitated, their pack instinct faltering as the mare and foal grew stronger in their resolve. The suspense thickened, and every step of the man seemed to carry more weight. The next move could change everything. The tension in the air thickened. The man stood frozen, just yards away from the tied mare and foal, his eyes locked on the wolves. The pack, still unsure of the man's presence, took a hesitant step back. He could feel the weight of their eyes, watching him, sizing him up. A chill ran through his spine as he realized how close he was to disaster. But there was no turning back now. He had come this far, and he couldn't leave them to face the wolves alone. As he took another step forward, the wolves slowly began to circle again, their growls low and guttural, echoing in the cold night. The mare, with her head held high and ears pricked, pawed the ground, her hooves scraping against the earth in a defiant rhythm. She wasn't giving up, not without a fight. Her protective instincts were stronger than the fear that gripped her body. The foal, still trembling, nuzzled against her, as if drawing strength from her courage. Then, something completely unexpected happened. A rustling sound came from the edge of the field, farther than where the man had entered. It was faint at first, but it grew louder. The man turned, his heart skipping a beat. Could there be more help on the way? But who could be out here in the middle of the night? Before he could make sense of it, a figure emerged from the shadows, an older man, hunched slightly from age but moving with surprising agility. It was the farmer, the one who had tied the animals to the tree in the first place. His face was weathered and grim, and his eyes locked onto the mare and foal. But there was something different in his expression. There was no sign of the cold-hearted indifference from earlier. Instead, a look of deep regret seemed to soften his features. "I couldn't let them die," the farmer muttered, almost as if speaking to himself. "I couldn't. It was a mistake." The man watching from a distance couldn't believe his ears. This was the same man who had tied them up, the one who had abandoned them to the wolves. What had changed in him? Why had he come back? The wolves, sensing something was different, hesitated once again. The air was thick with uncertainty. The farmer moved slowly, cautiously, his eyes never leaving the mare. He approached her, his hands trembling as he reached for the rope. The pack of wolves stood, confused by this sudden turn of events. They were wary of the human approaching the animals, but something else seemed to be holding them back. The man noticed it, too. The air had shifted once more. It wasn't just the farmer's presence, it was something deeper, something that connected the animals, the land, and perhaps even the old man himself. The man took a step forward, closer to the farmer. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. The farmer glanced at him, his eyes clouded with a mix of guilt and something else, something he hadn't expected to feel. "I don't know. I didn't think they'd survive. I thought it was the only way. But I can't just walk away. Not now." For the first time, the farmer's words didn't sound empty. They carried weight, an unexpected sincerity. The wolves, sensing the change, seemed to pause as if uncertain whether to advance or retreat. And that's when it happened. With a sudden, deafening noise, the foal let out a sharp cry, a call of defiance. The mare, bolstered by her young's unexpected courage, stamped her hooves harder into the earth, sending a shockwave through the pack. The wolves, once so confident in their approach, took a collective step back. Something about the force of the mare's stance, the way she stood tall beside her foal, made them hesitate. The air was charged with a quiet power, one that even the wolves couldn't ignore. For a moment, there was silence. The wolves, their instincts in conflict, seemed to pause. It was as if the animals knew they had to make a choice, press on and risk something unknown, or retreat and live to hunt another night. The leader of the pack looked between the man, the farmer, and the mare. The tension in the air was palpable. Finally, the wolves turned away, their retreating forms disappearing into the shadows, leaving the man and the farmer standing in stunned silence. The danger was gone, for now. The farmer stood there, his hand still hovering near the rope, unsure of what to do next. The man, though, was the first to speak. "You're not leaving them again, are you?" The farmer's gaze met his, and for the first time, there was no excuse in his eyes, only a raw, vulnerable truth. "No," he whispered. "I won't." The man nodded, not knowing what had changed in the farmer but understanding that something had. Whether it was guilt, redemption, or something else, it didn't matter. What mattered now was that the mare and foal had been spared, at least for the moment. And as the farmer carefully untied the rope, releasing the mare and foal, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been part of something greater than he understood. Something beyond his own control. But what could that something be? The mare stepped forward cautiously, her legs still trembling but stronger than before. Her foal, though weak, stood beside her, its small body now more upright and steady. The farmer, though still visibly shaken, untied the ropes with shaking hands, his movements slower than usual as if every gesture carried the weight of the night. The man who had stood by, watching the ordeal unfold, didn't speak, he simply observed the quiet, powerful connection between the animals and the farmer. The wolves were gone now, retreating back into the wilderness, but the tension didn't fade. It hung in the air like an unseen cloud, the uneasy sense that the danger was far from over. The man knew that if they didn't act quickly, the next pack might return. There wasn't much time to rest. "I don't understand," the man finally broke the silence, his voice low, almost as if speaking to himself. "What made them stop?" The farmer's hands stilled as he finished loosening the last knot on the rope. He didn't respond at first, as though he too was trying to make sense of the moment. His eyes lingered on the mare and foal, the creatures he had once callously abandoned, now standing in front of him like nothing had ever happened. "I've been a fool," the farmer said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought I was doing what was best for them. I thought they were better off dead than to be a burden." The man stared at him in disbelief. "Better off dead," he repeated, the words tasting sour in his mouth. "You're telling me you thought they should die just to make your life easier?" The farmer's face tightened. "I'm not proud of it," he said. "But I've been living for so long, thinking that survival meant sacrifice, that the weak don't make it. I thought I was just clearing the land, making it easier for the stronger animals to thrive." The man's anger flared for a moment, but he held it back. The tension between them was thick, but what mattered now was the present. The mare, having sensed the pause in the conversation, took a few steps toward the man. She nickered softly, a sound almost like a quiet acknowledgement. It struck him deeply, as if she understood what was happening and was grateful. "She knows," the farmer muttered. "She knows I was wrong." The man turned toward the farmer, his expression softening. "It's not too late," he said. "You can make it right." The farmer hesitated, his eyes shifting to the mare and foal again. His heart clenched. "I don't know if I can make up for this." But I'll try. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they're safe. And just like that, the atmosphere seemed to shift. It was subtle at first, a sense of understanding beginning to settle between the two men. What had started as a moment of cruelty was slowly turning into something else, something redemptive. The farmer wasn't the same man who had abandoned these animals earlier. He was now a man determined to set things right. The mare, sensing the change in the air, slowly moved toward the man who had helped her. She nuzzled his hand gently, her dark eyes filled with something that could only be described as gratitude. The foal, still unsteady but eager, followed its mother's lead, inching closer to the man and the farmer, its small body quivering with cautious curiosity. For the first time in a long while, the farmer felt something stir deep inside him. It was a long-forgotten feeling, compassion. A small flicker of hope that, perhaps, he could make a difference after all. Not just for the animals, but for himself. As the man watched this quiet exchange between the farmer and the animals, he realized something else. The wolves hadn't just turned away because of the mare's strength or the man's presence. There had been something else, an unspoken understanding between the creatures and their would-be saviors. The mare and foal had stood their ground not out of sheer strength, but out of a deep, unwavering bond. It was the bond of life, of survival, of love between mother and child, and it was this force that had held the wolves at bay. The man couldn't explain it, but he felt it, deep in his bones. There was something greater at work here. Something beyond his comprehension. The farmer, still lost in thought, turned to the man. "I won't let them down again," he said softly. The man nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Good," he replied. "But you'll need help. You won't be able to do it alone." The farmer's eyes widened, and for a moment, he seemed unsure. But then he glanced at the mare and foal, their silent strength urging him on. "I'll do whatever it takes," he repeated, this time with conviction. "I'll make sure they're safe. I won't let them suffer again." As the night wore on and the stars slowly began to appear in the sky, the tension that had once suffocated the air began to dissipate. The farmer, once hardened by years of harsh decisions, now stood with a renewed sense of purpose. He had learned something profound, something that would change the course of his life, and perhaps the lives of many others. The journey ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to face it. Ready to protect what was rightfully his to protect, the mare, the foal, and a part of himself he thought he had lost forever. And the bond between them all, human, horse, and foal, grew stronger with each passing moment, as the man and the farmer worked together to give the animals the future they deserved. The morning sun began to break through the clouds, casting a golden hue across the field. The mare, foal, and the two men stood in the quiet aftermath of the night's events, their forms bathed in the soft light. The threat of the wolves had dissipated, but something even more profound had taken root in the hearts of those present. The farmer moved cautiously, his hands trembling as he guided the mare and foal toward the small barn where they would be safe. His mind, once clouded with doubt and hardened by years of cruelty, was now open. He couldn't stop thinking about the bond he had witnessed between the animals and the inexplicable way the wolves had retreated. But there was more, something he hadn't yet seen. Something that felt too surreal to understand. The man, who had helped save the animals, observed quietly from a distance. He had seen many things in his life, but the events of the past night felt different. The connection between the farmer, the mare, and the foal was undeniable, but it was the bond between life and nature that felt otherworldly. As the animals stepped into the safety of the barn, the man's thoughts drifted. Suddenly, the mare froze. Her ears flicked up, and she looked directly at the man, her dark eyes wide with an intensity that took him by surprise. For a moment it was as if she was speaking to him without words, communicating something beyond understanding. The foal, too, stood still, its gaze shifting between the man and the mare. A chill ran down his spine. He couldn't explain it, but it felt as though the animals were trying to tell him something, a warning, or perhaps a message. His heart pounded in his chest as the mare moved toward him, her hooves soft on the ground, her eyes never leaving his. The man took a cautious step forward, unsure of what he was about to experience. And then it happened. The mare stepped closer, nudging her foal aside gently, and with a low whinny, she positioned herself in front of him. It wasn't just a protective gesture, it was as if she was offering herself, as if she was acknowledging that something had changed in him, something that had connected him to the land, the animals, and the very essence of life itself. The farmer stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything like this before. What was happening? In the stillness of the morning, a shadow moved across the field. The man turned his head quickly, his eyes narrowing. He hadn't expected company, especially not today. A group of people appeared on the horizon, riding horses and walking with purpose. It was the local sheriff, along with several neighbors, all gathered to see what had happened to the Mare and Foal. The sheriff had heard rumors of the farmer's cruel actions and had come to investigate. But as he approached the barn, the unexpected happened. The mare, with surprising confidence, moved away from the man and the farmer. She stood tall, her stance proud, as if guiding the group of riders toward the barn. And then, to everyone's shock, she knelt down in front of them, lowering her head as though in submission. The foal, still small and unsure, followed its mother's lead, walking beside her and standing as if it, too, had a role in this strange moment. The sheriff, along with his men, halted their horses, staring in disbelief. "What in the world?" one of the men muttered under his breath. The sheriff was the first to dismount. He approached the animals slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, his voice tinged with awe. The farmer, his eyes wide and his heart pounding, stepped forward, his guilt and newfound compassion intertwining. He took a deep breath, then spoke. I left them to die. But they've shown me something I can't explain. They're not just animals, they're something more. I can't undo what I've done, but I'll never turn my back on them again." The sheriff, though initially wary of the farmer, now saw the sincerity in his eyes. He had witnessed something that didn't quite make sense, something that reached beyond human understanding. The mare, once thought to be helpless, had not only survived the night but had proven to be something stronger, something capable of both power and grace. "What happened here last night?" the sheriff asked softly, his gaze moving between the mare, the foal, and the farmer. The man who had been with the farmer, watching it all unfold, spoke up. "It's as if these animals knew something we didn't. I've never believed in things I couldn't explain, but after last night, I don't know anymore." The sheriff's expression softened. "Sometimes, things happen that we can't explain. But that doesn't make them any less real." He paused, then looked directly at the farmer. "It seems you've learned something important. You've got a chance to make things right. Don't waste it." The farmer nodded, his face etched with a new sense of purpose. He looked down at the mare, his heart full of gratitude. "I won't," he said, his voice steady. "I'll protect them with everything I have." As the sheriff and his men left, the farmer stood in the barn, the weight of the past heavy on his shoulders, but now accompanied by a newfound sense of hope. The Mare and Foal had not just survived, they had thrived. And in doing so, they had sparked something within him that could never be undone. And in that moment, the farmer realized the true power of redemption, not just for the animals he had wronged, but for himself. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection and careful steps forward. The farmer, once hardened by a lifetime of difficult decisions, now saw the world through different eyes. His thoughts, once dominated by survival and pragmatism, were now shaped by the gentle, unspoken strength he had witnessed in the mare and her foal. He spent the next few weeks working tirelessly to make amends. No longer did he see his farm as just a business or a means to an end. It became a place of healing, both for the animals and for himself. The Mare and Foal, though still cautious, had come to trust him in a way that defied all logic. Each morning, they greeted him not with fear but with quiet understanding, as if acknowledging the bond that had formed between them. The man who had helped the farmer that fateful night returned often, offering his support. Together, they built stronger fences, reinforced the barn, and made sure that no harm would come to the Mare and Foal again. The wolves, though a constant presence in the wild, no longer seemed like an insurmountable threat. The farmer had learned that sometimes the true strength wasn't in how much one could endure but in how much one could give back. One quiet afternoon, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, the farmer stood outside the barn, watching the Mare and Foal grazing peacefully in the field. He felt a quiet pride in his chest, the kind of pride that comes not from power or wealth, but from doing the right thing. He had come so far, from the man who tied them to a tree to the man who would do anything to protect them. As he stood there, the man who had helped him approached, his steps slow but sure. They stood together, both watching the Mare and Foal, the gentle wind rustling the grass beneath their feet. "You've come a long way," the man said, breaking the silence. The farmer nodded, his voice steady. "I didn't think it was possible to change, to undo all the mistakes I made. But these two, they showed me something I could never have imagined. They showed me that redemption is real. And that even the smallest acts of kindness can turn the tide." The man smiled, his eyes warm with understanding. "It's never too late, is it?" The farmer shook his head. "No, it's not. I've learned that sometimes, it's not about being strong. It's about being willing to change and fight for what's right. Even if that means starting over." The Mare and Foal, sensing the peace in the air, moved closer. The foal, though still young and skittish, now trotted confidently beside its mother. The mare, strong and proud, watched the two men with eyes that seemed to carry all the wisdom of the land itself. The farmer reached out, placing a gentle hand on the mare's neck. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I owe you more than you'll ever know." And in that moment, he realized something profound. It wasn't just the Mare and Foal who had changed his life. It was the simple truth that sometimes, in the most unexpected ways, life had a way of showing us our truest selves, our capacity for growth, compassion, and redemption. The animals, once bound by ropes, were now free, not just in body, but in spirit. They had shown the farmer what it meant to be truly free. To forgive, to love, and to start anew, no matter how broken one might feel. And so, as the sun sank lower and the cool evening air wrapped around them, the farmer stood in silence, grateful for the lesson the Mare and Foal had taught him. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his days, a reminder that sometimes, even in our darkest moments, there is always hope. There is always a way back. The bonds between them, man, mare, and foal, were stronger than any rope could ever be. They were unbreakable now. The farmer had learned that in the face of adversity, there was always strength to be found. And sometimes, it takes something unexpected, something as simple as a foal finding its footing, or a mare protecting her young, to remind us of the power of life itself. Life lesson. The story of the Mare and Foal, and the farmer who nearly abandoned them, is a powerful reminder that redemption is always within reach. It teaches us that strength doesn't always come from physical power or dominance, it comes from resilience, compassion, and the ability to change. No matter how far we fall or how badly we've erred, it's never too late to make things right. Sometimes, the most unlikely teachers, like a mare or foal, can show us the true meaning of courage, love, and the strength to start over. The lesson is clear: in our moments of greatest despair, there is always a chance for renewal, for transformation, and for hope.